Okay, so I wanted to talk about the method and just kind of answer any questions that y'all had about it, because it's not like, I don't think it's overwhelming. It's a little detailed. And people had some really great questions in the comment section of a lot of my videos. So I just wanted to kind of go live and answer any of those questions that y'all might have. But I'll kind of just tell you the overall approach. Okay, first of all, I totally recommend reading the book. If you go straight to the card deck, it's not helpful. Like, the book really gives you the foundation for understanding division of labor, understanding, how the system works and what all the various cards are supposed to do. Okay. It also gives you things like how to start that conversation with your spouse. It talks about how do you approach your spouse and invite them into making a system like this. It talks specifically about what to do when one person is a stay-at-home parent and the other one is working for a paycheck. And how do you deal with feeling guilty because you feel like they already work, or feeling unappreciated because you feel like they're not doing enough. There's all of these tips and tricks on how to initiate that conversation with your partner. The other thing in the book is that it's written in such a way that you really, if you both want to read it, that's great, but you really don't both have to read it. It's written so that like one person would read it and then talk to their partner, and their partner would be like, sure. And then you could tell them how to play the game. And she literally sets it up like a game. So she has this card deck that you can get. Sorry, it's backwards, but it's called Fair Play. I have this linked. I have the book and the cards linked on my Amazon storefront. So if you like me, you want to support me, I do get commissions from those. And what we did was I read the book, we used the deck to kind of go through and play the game and to divide up our tasks. And then I actually, because I can't be chill about anything, ordered myself a bunch of customized magnets from Etsy, because there were some cards that we ended up having a slightly different way about it, and things that we wanted to add. So somebody says, what kind of tasks are in the deck? So this is a great question. So she divides up the kinds of tasks. So there's caregiving tasks. There's a bunch of caregiving tasks about kids, and you can remove those. There is the magic tasks. So things like who's going to be getting gifts for family members, who is going to be handling birthday parties, who's going to be doing holiday magic, things like that. So I like that, because that magic category is huge, I think, particularly for a lot of women and moms, because oftentimes creating the magic in the home falls to the mother. So whether that's doing the Santa thing, doing the decorations, filling up the, stockings, doing a craft or a gingerbread house with the kids, those are things that are automatically falling typically to the mom in the relationship, or the woman in the relationship. So that's the magic. There's one for magical beings, like who's going to do the tooth fairy. And so for us, we actually divided up our magical beings so that, he has some, I have some. And then there's things about the home, of course. And then there are, your home care tasks, cleaning, tidying, things like that. She actually has tidying and cleaning as just two separate cards. And then I think there might be a card for dishes, a card for laundry. But you may want to divide up the cleaning a little different. Like if you want one person to have toilets, one person to have this, that's fine. That's one of the reasons I sort of ordered these custom magnets, because we wanted to divide things up a little differently. And then you have things like home. So who's doing weekday dinners, who's doing weekend dinners, who's doing bedtime routines. I love that there's a card for mental health and special needs of children, like who's thinking about. So a lot of these things are not only the physical tasks that you are doing in your home. And if you just joined us, we're talking about Eve Rodsky's book, Fair Play, which has a card deck that you can get, also called the Fair Play deck. So it's not only about the task, the physical task, but it's also this mental load of who's thinking about our kids' mental health, who is thinking about values and good deeds with our kids, who is thinking about who is managing parents and in-laws and when they come to visit, who is managing the kids' social media, things like that. Okay, so that's caregiving. We talked about home. One of the magic cards is romance and marriage. And then there's out. So who's transporting, who's doing the pets, who's doing extracurricular activities, who handles spirituality, who does home maintenance, who orders home supplies, groceries, cleaning, packing, returns, auto, extended family, yada, 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 okay? And these are all linked on my Amazon storefront if you're interested in them. So let's talk about a couple of things about the system I really like. There are 2 things that she encourages you to do when you get the deck. And the first thing is to go through and cull your deck. Cull your deck. We're talking about the Fair Play book and the Fair Play cards. You do need to read the book before you use the cards. So you cull your deck. So there are some things in here. She recommends not playing with a full deck. And so we went through, and there were actually some cards we took out. We just thought about, we have limited time and energy, and some of these things we don't care about. We don't. I'm trying to give you guys an example of something that we took out. Let me think. Oh man, I can't find any now. We did take out a handful though, where we were like, we're just not going to do that as a family. Right? I'm definitely not playing as a full deck with a full deck. So we did that. And then when we had them, you go back through and you talk about what's called the MSC. So you establish a minimum standard of care, right? So somebody just asked a good question. They said, how would this look for willingness to participate in a potential partner? The book goes over that. That's what I love about it. The book tells you exactly how to approach a partner. This is totally useful even if you don't have kids. You would just take out the caregiving tasks because all the rest of them apply to anybody, okay? So you go through and you talk about your minimum standard of care. So if it's tidying, you guys agree together. What is the minimum standard of care? If it's meals on the weekend, what's the minimum? Are you okay with every time your partner has the card, him getting takeout? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. Are you okay with every time, someone has the groceries that they are getting off name brand stuff, right? Or that they're going every 2 weeks, or that they're, if they're going to order them and have them delivered. Like, you talk through that stuff on the front end so that you have that. And again, if you're just joining us, one of the things I love about this is that what if his minimum is not doing it? Well, that's why you have the conversation explicitly about what's acceptable and you agree together. And some of you will need to lower your expectations and some of you will need to bring it up. I get commissions if you buy it through my Amazon storefront. So go and check it out there. It's in my link tree in my bio. So you talk about your minimum standard of care. The magnets aren't linked yet because I haven't gotten them. I actually ordered them custom through an Etsy store. And as soon as I get them in, I'll show you guys and I'll put them. Let me tell you, I'll tell you about the magnets. Hang on. So once you get your cards and you talk about the minimum standard of care of each of them, then you go through and you talk about CPE, like conception, planning, execution. Because what happens a lot in division of labor, ask me that again about the neurodivergencies, because I think it does. What happens a lot is that you have one partner that says, I'll do it, just tell me what to do. Y'all have that? Just tell me what to do. Make me a list. That puts this other partner in this parent role where they're having to do all the mental labor. So CPE, where you're responsible for conception, planning, and execution, basically means that if you own that task, you own the whole task. You own the mental labor, you own the planning, you own the execution. So let's say that I have the card for non-sports extracurricular activities for my kids. That means that I own having to research the classes, having to go online and find the class, having to talk to my kid. It doesn't mean that I don't include my partner, but what it does mean is this. I ask my kids what they want to do. I research where those classes are. I ask my partner, hey, she wants to do ballet. How do you feel about ballet? Is that good for you? Okay, I'm thinking of putting it on the calendar at this time. Does that work? Okay, great. And then I sign her up for it. I fill out all the paperwork. I go buy her leotard, right? And her book has examples of what that MSC would look like. Her book has examples of what CPE can look like. And that way the mental labor is being held by the person that has the task. And there's a task for a family calendar, and there's a task for like transportation. And so it might be that I go through all that. And then if my partner has the family calendar, I then communicate, okay, Jesse's ballet class is on Saturdays at 9, and it's their responsibility to put that onto the family calendar. So it's helpful for childless couples also. You just take out the handful of cards that are for caregiving. And so that way they're not coming to you for directions. You're not leaving a list. You're not having to tell them what to do. And they're not doing that vice versa. And she talks you through the book about how not only are you owning it, but you're also refraining from nagging and being on top of each other. You have a set time that you're going to come back and say, how is this working, right? So we're talking about Fair Play, which is a book and a deck of cards from Eve Rodsky about how to divide your division of labor. And, oh, look, so Lindsay says that they've been doing it for a few months and they're child-free and they both love it. So I'll kind of tell you guys what we did once we divided up our cards, is that because there were some cards we didn't use, there were some cards we wanted to split up, then we decided to do, because I want to show you how many cards there are, first of all. So even when we divided them up, we were like, how are we going to remember what's on our list? And that's when I got the idea to get the magnets. So if you're struggling to get through the book, just go to the second half of the book and read the instructions on how to do the game. But it's a lot, right? And so by the time we had our list, we had 76 things on the list. And we couldn't remember what was on our list because we don't have very good memories. So I found this Etsy shop that does little magnets with like a picture and a name of a chore on it. And she would do it, what's it called? Like customized. So I put in an order and I'm going to get those probably in a few weeks. And I'm just going to put like a big magnet thing up with all of our tasks. And here's another reason why that's so important for us, is because your tasks aren't static forever. You decide when you're going to trade cards, and you don't have to trade all of them. You can trade some of them. Some of them you trade twice a day. Some of them you trade 3 times a week. So I'll give you sort of an example. Let's see. So there's a card in here called Romance and Marriage. And it basically just says that whoever holds that card is responsible for thinking about pouring into and cultivating the romance in your marriage. And they would also be responsible for any other sort of maintenance related things. Like if you're in therapy, then they'd be responsible for setting up the therapy times. But the cool thing about this card is that whoever's holding that romance card, they know like it's my job to be thinking about this, to be setting up dates, to write something sweet, to think about cultivating. And then you trade it off. And so you might trade once a week. My partner and I decided to trade once a month. So like for the month of March, I'm the one thinking about how can I be romantic towards my husband. And then in April, he gets the card and then he knows, okay, this is something I have to put on my radar. How am I going to be romantic towards my wife? How am I going to create romantic opportunities? This way you avoid those arguments about like, you're not trying enough, I'm not trying enough. Well, it's hard for me to think about it. So that would be an example of trading off one once a month. The next thing is you could trade it off. You know, there's one for like waking up in the middle of the night with kids. You might have someone that keeps that for 6 months and then you trade, or you might trade it off every night. That's pretty cool too. There's a little combination of kids ones that are like diapers, supervision, meals, grooming. And what we decided to do with that was to trade those off once a day. So my husband wakes up in the morning with our kids, and while he is in the morning, he owns those cards. Okay, so that means that whatever I do, no matter what I do, he still owns those cards. So if I decide that I'm gonna sleep, that's fine. He owns those cards, he takes care of those kids. If I decide that I'm gonna get up early and go downstairs and drink a cup of coffee, he still owns those cards. Because I'm mom, what tends to happen is that anytime I'm in the room, my kids go immediately to me. And if you're in a partnership where you have a mom and a dad, that often happens, right? And so it's easy for one partner to sit back and just let somebody else take it over. But with this explicit agreement of who's holding these cards right now, who's holding these cards, they know whose responsibility it is. And someone said, can you still do the card if you're not holding it? I think you have, yeah. I mean, there's nothing saying like I can't get my kid a snack at that time or help them get dressed. But I think what it is more just that the other partner isn't sitting back and waiting for you to do it. Like they're taking the initiative to get it done. And if you want to jump in and help them put their pants on, or that's fine. But also if I want to sit there with my cup of coffee, that's fine too. As soon as I get the magnets, I'll share the shop with you guys. And so then in the evenings, the deck switches and I hold those cards. So we're talking about the Fair Play Method by Eve Rodsky. There's a book and a card deck talking about division of labor. So in the evenings, exactly, or waiting until you tell them to do it. And then they go, oh, okay. So in the evenings, we switch cards. Now I hold those cards. I'm responsible for feeding them and putting on their PJs and playing with them. So he might work late or he might come home. And when he comes home, I hold the bedtime routine cards, but he actually loves doing bedtime. So when he is here, he'll jump in and do one for one of the kids and I'll do the other one. But when he's not here, I do both of them. And so it helps with that communication of, I know it's on me and he can jump in if he wants to. And the morning's on him and I could jump in if I want to. But it takes off that asking your partner to do something, having to leave your partner lists. And then somebody asked me a question if this would work well with people that have neurodivergencies. I think so for a couple of reasons. I think that when you own the conception, planning, and execution of a task, it frees you to create whatever system and ritual works for you. So let's take like dishes, for example. You guys, most of you know, famously, I have a dirty dish rack. And what I like to do is put my dishes on a dirty dish rack all day long and then load up my dishwasher at the end of the night. So because I'm responsible when it comes to dishes, I'm responsible for thinking about the dish system, creating the dish system, and executing the dish system. I can do that any way I want. Like my husband doesn't get to go, I don't like the rack on the shelf. I'd be like, too bad. Then if you don't like it, you can have the dishes card. And so you could create whatever adaptive systems work for you. And I think that's really helpful. The other thing I love about it is that there are these cards called wild cards. Okay. So a wild card is basically like life events that disrupt your daily flow. These are things like an aging parent, like having to caretake for a parent, a home renovation, a new job, moving, having a new baby, a death in the family. It also includes things like major sicknesses or having daily disruptions. And basically it's this idea that when there is a sort of daily disruption in someone's life or in your life as a family, you know, someone can play that card and say, okay, I will take on a little bit more during this time period while this wild card is in play. And what we did when we made our magnets is that I just made one big square magnet that said wild card on it. Like we didn't write specific different scenarios. But the idea is that the system not only teaches you how to divide the labor, it also teaches you how to communicate about the labor and to ask for what you need. So, you know, wild cards could be anything from a kid gets sick or you get sick, a big project at work. It could be travel. It could be moving, where if one of us sort of has a wild card, we just communicate to the other spouse, like, I'm going to play a wild card. You know, and right now I need you to step up and do some of these, right? I need a redeal. And you can redeal at any point in time. But the thing about the wild card is it's like a temporary redeal. Like you're not redealing for ever. You're literally just redealing until the circumstances of that wild card end. So like my husband and I started this system last week. He got sick over the weekend and his first thing was like, oh no, my cards. I was like, well, that's like being sick in bed with a fever is a wild card. And so, you know, saying, hey, I'm sick to the point that I need to play the wild card just communicates to the spouse what they need to do. Some people, I think, get overwhelmed by the pack of cards and how big they are. But to be honest, I don't think looking at the deck is more overwhelming than when you're the person doing the whole deck. And a lot of people commented like, wait, you guys have 76 tasks? But the thing is that if you were to sit down right now and write down all the tasks you're doing in your home, both the physical tasks and the mental labor, you would easily come up with 76 things. Like at any given time, there are 35 things in my head that just need to be done in our home. Not even things that I are doing, just things that need to be done. And you can do it with multiple adults. I think you could do it with roommates. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be using the marriage and romance card, but I think that you can do that. Yeah, the author uses this in her home. It's all about, how she came to it. And yeah, see, some people, like Lindsay's saying, they only use 40 to 45 cards. They're child free. And like when we did our magnets, what we did was we actually made a magnet for opening duties and closing duties, so that like we could change the list of what's on the closing duties whenever we want, but we still have like that magnet to signify that. You can read more about it on my Amazon storefront. So if you go to my Amazon storefront, I have both the book and the cards linked, and you really do need to read the book before you get the cards. I've been wanting to talk about fair play forever, but it's just I wanted to be able to go through it first, and it's taken us a long time to like get to where we could really sit down and go through it as a system. And so those are kind of the keys. It's like you redeal the deck as often as you need to. You also set a time to come back and talk about it. And the book sort of addresses like what happens if the task isn't done, what happens if, someone's feeling they don't want to do it. The other thing I wanted to share with you guys about it is that there are these two cards called the unicorn space. And I really love the way that she frames the book. And this is why it's so important to read the book. I think it would work well. And the question about if a partner is on the spectrum or has autism, yes, I think it would work. Because her whole point in the book of why you need to divide your labor fairly is because each person deserves to be an individual with hobbies and interests and passions and an identity outside of their role. She has this incredible chapter where she talks about how she interviews dozens and dozens of couples that have divorced after being married for a long time. And she says that she keeps hearing the same story over and over and over, that they got married, that she took on the majority of the labor in the home. He worked, even if she worked or didn't work. And that's how he wanted it. And she was willing to do that. She fast forwards 10 years and they get divorced. And she asks him, like, why do you think you got divorced? And all of these men say, she just wasn't the interesting woman that she was when I married her. She used to be so passionate. She used to be so interesting. And she just isn't anymore. And what Eve identified was that when one partner takes on the majority of the mental and physical labor of the family and the home, they slowly begin to suffocate under it until they lose themselves. They lose their identity. They don't know who they are. They don't exist outside of this role of wife or mother or homemaker. And it makes them unhappy. And then eventually, like, they begin to not appreciate each other. And a lot of these men didn't see that they had basically done that to the spouse. And I don't think it's just like shitty men that do it. I think it's also loving men that have dad privilege and male privilege that don't see it. And so the book isn't just about like, oh, everyone should do the same. It needs to be fair. It's really about how like this will save your marriage. It's really a book about how you can survive and thrive and be in love and feel as though you have a true partner, and how feeling as though you have a true partner is what allows you to cultivate interest and passion and all of those sorts of things. I will download this live, and as long as it saves correctly, I'll upload it to YouTube so that you guys can keep watching it or show it with your partner. So she talks about this aspect that in order to remain an interesting human being, everyone needs their unicorn space. And this idea that everyone needs the space, capacity, and time to pursue something that interests them, that makes them feel passionate, that makes them feel alive. And so each of you has a unicorn space card, and you decide before you divide these out, what will be your unicorn space. And you pick what it is. It could be something simple. I'm going to take up knitting again. It could be something big. I want to start a nonprofit. And you pick something that makes you feel alive, and you agree on it. so that you're not only sort of holding each other accountable for, you need to go out and do your unicorn space, but you're encouraging each other. And you're also taking on the responsibility to protect their space to be able to go and do that. And this is really key. And that's what the whole book revolves around. So it's much more, it's much deeper than just let's divide the tasks up. So the book is, someone says, does the book also talk about LGBTQ plus relationships? So she talks in the book about how this is she's focusing on the heteronormative pattern of unequal labor ending up on the woman. I think the system itself works great for any partner, even roommates, even multiple roommates, even like older kids, I think could do some of this. But a lot of her sort of like reflection and research about the dynamics and how they play out focus on heteronormative couples, because she's in a heteronormative couple, and that's where she was seeing that dynamic shift specifically. So for people who don't have consistent interests, well, it doesn't have to be the same interest. You can change your unicorn space anytime you want. But the point is that you have to be finding something for your space. The book has a ton of advice on how to bring this up with your partner. Exactly how to phrase. She has some do's and don'ts, like don't say this, don't say this. Okay, say this, invite them to do this. Framing it as, I want us to talk about this so that we both have time to claim this unicorn space. We both have time to really be interesting and passionate, and it'll strengthen our marriage. So that's why the book was so important in sort of grounding this. The book also specifically talks about what to do if one person is a stay-at-home parent, what to do specifically if someone's working from home. And she really addresses a lot of that, because she goes through like these myths we believe about whose time is more valuable. And she sort of debunks a bunch of myths around division of labor. So what questions do y'all have? Because I feel like I've sort of laid out, I'm sure there's some things I haven't laid out about it, but yes, they definitely address that. And you know what? Could he read the book too? So she actually addresses that. She addresses that issue of like, well, if I have to read the book and I have to bring it up, aren't I the one doing more work already? She addresses that in the book. And the truth is like someone has to start it, right? She does give examples of conversation starters in the book. As a man who is getting ready to be married, I love this and want to be yes, definitely bring this book up. Just start this way. Would it be wise to pick a few cards and then add on? You can obviously customize it any way that works for you. The truth is that like these things are already being done by someone in the home. So the book name is Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. So you can read the book together, but it also does work if one person just reads the book and then talks about, particularly if you have one. Okay, so someone says they only use the daily grind cards. So that's a good thing to point out too, is that like some of the cards have this little symbol, this coffee cup symbol, which means that it's a daily grind. So the difference between a daily grind card and a card that's not a daily grind is that some of these cards, like health insurance. Well, how many times a year or a month do you have to deal with health insurance? Maybe a lot, but certainly not as often as you have to deal with dishes. Also, like dealing with health insurance is something that for the most part can be done on your time. I'm back, okay. For the most part can be done on your time. So if one partner has the majority of the I can do this on my time tasks, sitting at my desk at work, and the other partner has the majority of the daily grind, which is like I have to actually live my life around these tasks. They're repetitive, they're every day. That is not going to end up to be a division of labor that is fair. She also does not specify trying to make the actual deck equal. It's not about equal, it's about fair. Like it will come down to who is different, who likes it, who's better at it, who has the time for it. So someone's asking to see the cards. So I'll show you the cards. So this is Christmas magic, birthday celebrations, marriage, and romance. I'm trying to get you some of like the daily grind cards. Weekday meals, tidying, cash and bills, magical beings, tutoring and coaching the kids, school breaks. I got magnets from Etsy. I haven't actually gotten them in yet, otherwise I will show you. And as soon as I get my magnets in, I'll show them to you and I'll tell you guys where I got them from. And because I mentioned to you guys, because you do like redeal your deck so often, we wanted that visualization of like, oh, this one task we're moving right now. Exactly. So when we start our magnet system, I'll show you guys. Because what happened was we went through the whole thing and then we were like holding our cards like, how am I going to remember all these? Yeah, so the book discusses how to make things equitable, like how you're not focusing on just making the deck equal, but how it is okay to say like this person, you know, somebody who works from home might have a different availability, but also someone who does this, that, and the other, whatever. There's no specific addressing of like BIPOC issues or households in it. I believe she is a white woman. I don't know off the top of my head. But she pretty much just sticks to like the heteronormative issues that she sees in division of labor and her system for using it. And then she actually took it and used it with lots of couples before she wrote the book so that she was able to kind of like work out the kinks. But she has a website too, if you want to check out her website. And she has a second book called Claim Your Unicorn Space, if you want to know more about that. So, do we think this works with neurodivergent coping skills? Yeah, so one of the things that I think is helpful about it, and I put a video up about this, is that when you talk about those wild cards, you know, you can make up your own wild cards. Like a family, you might have a wild card that says chronic pain flare-up or mental health episode. You might have, you know, your own various wild cards so that as your daily limits and capacities fluctuate, you can communicate with your partner about what's going on and what you're going to be able to handle. And that lets your partner know when they might need to take a task, when you might need to, you could redeal this deck every day if you wanted to. And it doesn't mean you'd have to sit down and go through this whole process. It would just mean that you would communicate with each other when you've got a wild card happening in your life, when you're having that diminished capacity, and that other person will know. And then you have a time that you come back down and sit and kind of revisit the system and how it's working. Because let's say you're having a chronic pain flare up, and so you decide that of your list of 10 things, you can maybe get 5 done. And you know, you're communicating, I've got a wild card. These are the 5 things I can't get done today. And you either just agree each other, okay, those things won't be done today, or that person can step up and help. Does she talk about what happens when the other person doesn't hold up their end? She does, at length. At length. One of the reasons for like the CPE is this idea that like, if they don't do it, how you should respond, how you should handle that. And ways that kind of keeps it, there's a TikToker here that talks about like your choice, your consequence. Doing it in a way that sort of keeps that in their ball. Like you don't clean up the mess that they make by not doing it. Somebody said, can you prioritize yeah, you can prioritize the most important. Absolutely. And you might, that's the thing. Like someone says, I'm worried I'll constantly ask him to, well, but if you worry that you'll be constantly asking him to do the extra things, then maybe you should just divide the deck that way to begin with. And you don't have to divide the deck forever. Like divide the deck, say, let's do 7 days, and then let's sit down and talk about it. Rooted Wellness says, what if your partner has different standards of cleanliness than you do? So that's a great question. And she talks about that in the book as well. When you sit down with your cards and you pare down the deck that you're going to play with, you go through each card and you talk about your minimum standard of care. So you agree together, what is the minimum standard of care? How is it that we're both going to agree? And it's just kind of like when I talk about functioning, like what's functional, you guys are agreeing what is kind of the minimum standard of functioning that we need from this task. And once you agree on that, you back up and allow your partner to run with that task as long as they're meeting the minimum standard of care. Right. So like if somebody's happy with everything cluttered and somebody is not, you have to come to some sort of collaborative agreement on what is going to be functional for both of you. And that might include some people stepping it up and other people lowering their expectations, but getting to kind of a good enough baseline. And it also facilitates this conversation about what is functional for you and being able to talk about that. Because it might be that, one of you thinks you're just talking about preferences when the other one is able to communicate, I really struggle to concentrate to get through my day unless ABC is happening. Yeah, and it's super wise to have these conversations when you're not angry and you're not heated. For sure. Fair Play is by Eve Rodsky. Yeah. How do you handle doing tasks together? So in this method, you don't really do tasks together. You can certainly divide up. I mean, you can put your own spins on whatever you need, but she talks about kind of things that she's seen work, things that she's seen not work. So yeah, trying to pick a time when you're calm is tough. I don't want to start a fight, right? Do I recommend starting slow with 8 to 10 tasks? I think it's really up to you. We did not start slow. We just took the deck and said we need to redivide because we had some like transitions and roles and work and things. And that's the other thing. I think what I see for a lot of people is that when they don't talk explicitly about it and there's just a lot of assumptions, things might start out really equal and then there's a slow slide into one person carrying the majority of the tasks. And so you do want to prevent that slow slide. You can get the book and the cards in on my Amazon storefront. Yeah, and so whenever you have these transitions, a new job or whatever it is, like you say, we got to redeal the deck. And you also just redeal the deck because nobody wants to do the same thing forever. And I do think that, depending on your kiddos, you can incorporate them into this. They might, we actually did a magnet. So this isn't a card, but we have a magnet called Kids Chores, which is like, who is responsible for making sure who's going to be thinking about what do our kids need to be doing and who's going to model it and make sure they do it. Yeah. So if you're asking about like weaponized incompetence, she doesn't address, I think, that exact term, but I mean, the answer is yes. She addresses all of these issues in the book. The system is called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. There's a book that you have to read. The book is key. And then she's got a card deck that comes with it if you want to play the game. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from those of y'all that have teens, like how that works. The author's name is Eve Rodsky. What are your thoughts on cleaning timetables? So that would be something that you would discuss in your minimum standard of care. So if somebody has cleaning, right, and maybe you divide it out more, but let's say you have cleaning or cleaning toilets, like you would discuss timeframes in that. So can someone clean the toilet once a month? Can they clean it once every 6 months? Do they need to clean it every day? You would come to a place where you would agree together how often that needs to happen. Yeah. So, all right, Public Health Mama says, when you say you jumped right into it, did you both read the book and then do the cards? We didn't both read the book. You can both read the book, but I read it by myself and loved it and then just said, I want to do this system. And he's like, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so someone says that they don't deal the kids to the cards, but the parent can include the kids in it. Yeah, what we did like a specific magnet or a specific card that says like kids chores, like who's going to be thinking about that. Someone says, are there multiple different childcare related task cards? Oh, yes. Yes, there's a big thick stack of them. So like diapering is a card, supervision is a card, playing is a card, grooming is a card, bath time is a card, meals is a card, tutoring is a card, transportation is a card, lots of cards for for care tasks like that. Yeah. Stop. Anyways. Yeah, I'll explain wild cards because someone just asked. Yeah, cleaning is just one card. Again, you could certainly make up as many cards as you want. But somebody asked a question about that. Yeah, so a wild card is basically when something comes up in your life that disrupts your daily flow. Something like getting sick, having a baby, having a parent die. It could be even things that you may make up your own wild cards. Like, you know, my husband's an attorney. So for us, like when he is like coming up to a trial, like 2 weeks before a trial, like that's going to be a wild card. He may not be able to do the things he's usually can do, or if I'm traveling, right? If I'm going to do book tour stuff, that's a wild card. Yes, Olivia says, are there personal care cards? Yes. The other thing is there are personal care cards for you and your partner. So I like this. You're holding not only the cards that you will deal with each other, but you also always hold your own cards. So you'll always hold your cards for self-care, grooming, adult friendships, grooming and wardrobe. So like you'll always hold your cards that have to do with you taking care of you, and your partner will always hold their cards that have to do with them taking care of them, so that you can actually visualize, just how many cards there are. I'm gonna take a couple more questions and then I have to hop off to do some other things. Yeah, there's some self-care cards on there. And at first I was like, so wild cards are not distributed. That's a great question. Someone said, how do you distribute wild cards? You don't. You do not divide up the wild cards. Wild cards are only there to signify, hey, I'm in a wild card period. So I need you to take some of these tasks that I am usually responsible for. Somebody asked if they could be used for like co-parenting, and certainly you might need to come up with your own list, but yeah, I think it can be. Yeah, so a wild card is just an indicator that one of you is experiencing diminished capacity. And that lets the other person know, hey, let me step up and do this. So person 2, probably not, because it's specifically about dividing them. They do have pet things, yes. And there are some instant downloads on Fair Play. Yeah. All right, y'all, I gotta shut it down. I noticed that Laura's in the chat. Go follow that darn chat because she talks about this stuff all the time. She talks about division of labor. She's super familiar with Fair Play. Laura and I sometimes text about Fair Play. So anyways, check it out. The book is Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. You can get the book and the card deck. They're linked on my Amazon storefront. If you want to send me some commissions, that'd be great. And I hope that you guys benefit from it. And I'll keep you guys in the loop as to how it's working for our family. And I will definitely show you our magnets once they come in. Have a great day, guys.